950. Real Texas, Real Talk. KPRC Houston, an iHeart radio station.
I have a sneaking suspicion that when it comes to confirming Ketanji, I'm going to get used to that name, Ketanji Brown Jackson, this is going to be a whole different experience than what we saw last time around. The last two times around, in fact, as it relates to nominating and affirming a Supreme Court justice. I don't think there are going to be any personal attacks, and I don't think that necessarily because she's a black woman. I think that's just because Republicans don't do the personal attack thing. It's pretty rare. They remain civil, even perhaps at times when they shouldn't be so civil. And I think they look at this nomination as something that, he said he was going to nominate a black female. He nominated a black female. He's got a progressive nominee who's going to replace a progressive nominee. She's probably more progressive than Stephen Breyer is, but it's kind of like tit for tat here. We're doing almost a straight up trade. That's my thoughts anyway. Rob Crain joins us, CBR law firm based out of Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the show, Rob. What do you think of this pick?
Well, Jimmy, I think your calculus is on the mark. What I think about the pick, I think Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson is a high caliber pick. As you noted, there's not going to be any attacks on her intellect. There will not be any attacks on her character. They're both fairly unassailable. She's a very bright, accomplished individual. Definitely of somebody with a resume that's fitting at the Supreme Court. You'll hear political wrangling over some of the recent decisions that she's made in regards to the Trump administration. But as you noted, from Merrick Garland to Brett Kavanaugh to Amy Coney Barrett, this one should be much more civil.
And I'm not suggesting it shouldn't be civil, but I'm a little, the Republicans, as you know, they always play it very middle of the road. They always try to take the high ground. It's like they always want people to like them. Are we going to have any tough questions asked of this nominee? Is there an area of weakness where they should be asking tough questions?
Well, I'm an advocate of asking tough questions to nominees, and they spend a good bit of their time, as Judge Jackson's doing right now, learning how to deflect what it's going to come from the Senate confirmation hearings. Yes, there should be hard questions asked of her judicial philosophy. How will she go about interpreting the Constitution? We have two very different trains of thought on how we go about interpreting our Constitution philosophically. There's more of the Scalia side of things, and then there's more of how Justice Breyer and Justice Souter and others in the past see the interpretation of the Constitution. Her opinions in the past should be dived into, and we should have a better understanding of how she goes about her thought process. Now, she's a very bright individual, and she put a lot of thought into her opinions, and she's noted for that. So it should be a rigorous, robust discussion, and she should be questioned as seriously as any other appointee.
One of the I'm going to get a reaction here to a quote. This is a quote from Ms. Brown Jackson that I thought was at least gives me a little bit of hope, at least in one area. Here's what she said: "Among my many blessings, and indeed the very first, is the fact that I was born in this great country. The United States of America is the greatest beacon of hope and democracy the world has ever known." That at least sounds like she's somebody who's proud to be an American, which is more than I can say for some of the progressives these days.
Well, I tell you, you just look at her life story. She was raised by two parents who were both school teachers. One ascended to being principal of the school in which she taught. The other went to law school and ended up being an attorney for a major city in this country. She has a brother who is a military veteran, also a lawyer. She's got uncles who served in law enforcement. She had an uncle who was put in jail for a nonviolent cocaine offense with a really long sentence, and she went out and battled what she saw to be unfair sentencing guidelines for nonviolent drug issues. This is a woman who is unprecedented in some of her experience. She was a public defender. We have not had, in the modern era, a United States Supreme Court justice who was ever a public defender. That's a hard job. So she's going to bring not only an American perspective, but she's going to bring a unique perspective to the job. And very proud of her roots and heritage here, and I think she is a candidate we can all be proud of.
One of the other names that got bandied about a lot was Judge J. Michelle Childs, who's in the Carolinas, because she didn't go to the traditional Harvard law school kind of thing, and had the support of a lot of people, including Republicans in the state that she's from. I'm going to assume for just a minute that maybe she was a little too conservative for the Biden administration. What do we know about what went into the politics of this?
She was an outstanding candidate to be considered, as was Leondra Kruger, California Supreme Court judge. I don't know what obviously went in the thinking behind the Biden administration. One of the objective facts that you can look at is Judge Childs, I believe, is about 56 years of age. I do not want to get a woman's age wrong. And Judge Jackson is 51. Presidents, no matter what their political affiliation, look for candidates around that 50-year mark so that they can have their justices serve longer on the court. I don't know if that was a factor or not. I am a graduate of a non-Ivy League law school, and I would like to see more diversity of education on the court. But for Judge Jackson, both her parents went to predominantly black universities, and she was the first of her family to go to Harvard, where she was magna cum laude, and then Harvard Law, where she was summa cum laude, and supervising editor of the law review there. So she does bring some diversity of education from her family experience. But I would like to see more diversity on the court in the future in that regard.
Rob Crain, one of the things I always find interesting is just the whole process of questioning these nominees, because the one thing that they all have in common, regardless of which side of the aisle they come from, politically speaking, is they're all very good at giving non-answer answers. In other words, if given any sort of a potential case that they would hear in front of the Supreme Court and how they might think about it or how they might rule on it, they almost always universally, do they not, manage to avoid answering the question.
They do, and talking to a state candidate here in Texas, she taught me that, look, the first time you answer a question, even if it's something as universal as our agreement on the outcome of Brown versus the Board of Education, getting rid of this separate but equal standard we had back in 1954, once you make comment about one case, then you've opened up the door for you to comment about any other case, and immediately what happens is a hot button issue like abortion or death penalty or something like that is immediately going to come your way. And that's what they are trying to stay away from. So that's their thinking on the appointee side of things. If I answer one question about one case, then I'm going to get hit with those really difficult ones. So that's why you see them walk that tightrope.
Do you expect a quick confirmation process?
I hope so. I mean, part of the backdrop of this is Merrick Garland spent 293 days waiting for a hearing that he never received. Amy Coney Barrett only spent 30 days before getting her hearing a week before the last election. That's not the way we should do things in this country on either side, politically, Republican or Democrat. The longest time between appointment and hearing, goes back to Judge Brandeis. It was 125 days. So we need to get back into presidents appointing qualified candidates regardless of, ideology, or at least polarizing ideology. And the Senate giving deference to the president, though doing their job to advise and consent, and get this done within a reasonable time. 3 months or so would fit that realm. We'll see what the Republicans want to do here. My guess is they'll have this one slide through fairly quickly.
Okay. Rob Crain, thanks so much for your insight. Good to talk to you, sir.
Anytime.